next speaker, Stacy Glass. Hi, Stacy. Stacy is the co-founder and executive director of Chem Forward, a nonprofit advancing safer chemistry for a circular economy. With over 20 years in sustainability and green building, she previously served as vice president of the built environment at Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute. Stacy also co-founded Cara Green, a sustainable building materials company. With an MBA from Duke University, she blends business experience with environmental knowledge to drive systemic change in safer chemistry practices. And Stacy, it's been a delight to work with you over the last 10 years plus on this journey to better material health, and see all the great work that you are now doing with Chem Forward and our collaboration with you. We're looking forward to getting all of this available in the HPD Builder really soon. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. What a thoughtful introduction. You really blended the bio nicely. And I'm excited to share something new with you today. As Wendy said, I'm the co-founder and executive director of Chem Forward. I'm also going to be talking about the Safer Chemistry Impact Fund today, where I serve as an advisory board member. And I'm talking about establishing metrics to start to move towards safer chemistry. So we start out this conversation by sort of acknowledging that chemical pollution rivals carbon as an existential threat. And I love the planetary boundaries here. In this report, there's 9 planetary boundaries that are being quantified, and you'll notice climate up here in the upper left, but what they call novel entities, or was previously called chemical pollution, has exceeded the planetary boundary and rivals climate here as being far past a sustainable point. When we dig into novel entities, what they're saying here is they haven't quantified the amount of pollution out there and saying we've hit the tipping point. What they're saying is that the annual production and release outpaces global capacity for assessment and monitoring. So where this leads us is, you can't manage what you don't measure. And we have not traditionally been measuring the vetting of materials before they go into circulation. So our work on the Safer Chemistry Impact Fund, and I want to acknowledge Anthesis Consulting as being really important in the process of developing this report. And I've got a link in my presentation to the report down here when you receive the slides after. But this Accelerating the Transition to Safer Chemistry was a multi-month, multi-stakeholder endeavor to establish a first-of-its-kind framework with a common language that could be used up and down the supply chain to start to measure the transition to safer chemistry. And it's based on chemical hazard assessments, which is why I thought there was a nice intersection here with the HPDC community, in that hazard assessment has always been embedded in the HPD. So what they present are 6 metrics in this report. And first, metric 0 is about understanding what's known and not known about the chemicals being used. And this, as you'll see, can be talking about what's used at an industry level, at a product level, at a functional chemical level, the scales for all those different fractions of the picture. And Wendy was kind enough to provide a data set for us to try on a metric 0 as a pilot. And I need to acknowledge my colleague, Sarah Gilberg at Habitable, formerly HBN, for pulling all of this information for us and letting us crunch this data. So first, let me tell you what an ingredient intelligence report is, and then I'll show you what the HPD metric 0 looks like. So what we're trying to do here is provide clear, comparable data for chemical management and reporting on metrics. And the first thing is what's known and not known from a chemical hazard perspective. And what we want to do is measure progress year over year and quantify, moving away from high hazard, closing data gaps, but also in doing that, increasing the amount of safer chemistry that's being used. I think this can really help look around corners and stay ahead of regulation. As you know, chemical hazard assessments go beyond, are kind of the next step beyond lists to help us say, we're not just free of, but we're actually safer. And that's the sort of shift we're looking for with this data. I'll remind you, chemical hazard assessment, whether it be green screen, US EPA's safer choice methodology, or cradle to cradle methodology. These are all credible chemical hazard assessment methodologies that look at 20 plus human and environmental endpoints. I'm showing you an example of a Chem Forward hazard table. You'll notice down the left, the oral, dermal, and inhalation routes of exposure. So while we're sort of a hazard first, we're not a hazard only. Helping people decide sort of what the appropriate use of these various chemicals are. So an ingredient intelligence report uses the chemical hazard assessments, but then we roll up that hazard table that I just showed you into a very clear hazard band. A, B's, and C's are considered safer chemistry. The D's and the F's are the things that we want to move away from. Question marks are those data gaps that we talked about, and you'll see represented in some of the graphics here, the IP, the in progress. And we have several hundred chemical hazard assessments in progress at any given time. So that can be significant when we start to add those up. Before I jump into the HPD data, I want to show you an example of a report that'll be released next week. So you're getting an early preview. In beauty and personal care, we aggregated data from our Know Better, Do Better collaborative, includes Ulta, Sephora, The Honest Company, Beauty Counter, Credo Beauty, and two suppliers, Innolex and Dow. We aggregated this data, looked at over 8,500 SKUs. There was over 318,000 ingredients disclosed, but once we deduplicated those, mica showed up 5,000 times and water showed up this many thousands of times. There were only 2,279 unique chemicals. And so what we saw here was, one, feeling very emboldened that this is manageable, like we got this. And we knew so much about the chemicals that we did have, but the big aha, or the sort of alarm bell, really was the amount of unknowns. And given the intimacy of these products, is it really okay that 30% of this data was unknown? And that set into motion an action plan that you can read more about next week. That was at a kind of taking a sector look, a baseline report. We've also been able to do this in a product category. This was cleaners and degreasers in the electronics assembly. And what our electronics collaborative was looking to do was to ask their suppliers to screen their cleaner and degreaser formulations before they were put into use in the assembly. Cleaners and degreasers are one of the highest exposure routes for employees, and therefore it was imperative that they be optimized. But getting all these products certified was sort of a long haul. So this is a step towards certification. And you'll notice here what we did is analyze several hundred common ingredients and made sure that we had at least 95% of those assessed. These purple were all the ones that were in process when we ran this donut, as we call it. So let's look at the health product declaration data set. This was 7,200 HPDs. It represented 544 suppliers. Almost 82,000 substances were disclosed there. Not all of them could be identified. If they came with a CAS number, as they do from the HPD builder, we got them, but there was still about 15% that were redacted or IP or somehow indicated in that way that they were not disclosed. So much like we did in beauty and personal care, we deduplicated those down, and shockingly, I expected a much higher number here because of the sort of complexity of the products present across 7,200 health product declarations, but there was only 2,600 unique substances present. So a very manageable number, right? Something we can do something about. And with no intervention whatsoever, we could assign a confident hazard band in A, B, C, D, or F, or in process, to 54% of the data. Now, this was time-stamped in January of this year, so I know that we've already made significant progress on this. But look at this, we can say that 37% are safer chemistry. While there's 16% Ds and Fs down here, 7% of those were special conditions. And of the 46% that are gray, 19% of those were special conditions. Special conditions, we really adopted this term from the Health Product Declaration Collaborative. Those are those geological materials, polymers, those things that really where a generic chemical hazard assessment isn't going to tell us much. And where maybe a trade name assessment would be more appropriate, especially for those things like polymers. So well-characterized data set, some known hazards occurring in high frequency, but notice several of these were special conditions. How I see many folks dealing with that is just additional documentation to show us that it's not being used in this hazardous way, respirable, or whatever the case might be. But others on this list that aren't special conditions might be ripe for new additions to RSLs or other phase-out initiatives, so we can get a sense of what those are and where they are. And then finally, insight number 4, targeted investment in chemical hazard assessments impacts many products. At the time when we ran this, there were 17 chemical hazard assessments in process that were relevant to this database, and it would have filled almost 900 data gaps, across all those HPDs. So this is where you can see that a shared data set really has benefit to everybody who's participating in the platform. Just wanted to make the point again, as I started out, that this is the fractional scaling. Really, we can look at this from a sector perspective, like we just have with the HPDs, down to products, and then even functions. So what we did is took the coatings subset out of those HPDs to just look at coatings. And here we see even a rosier picture, 788 products from 45 suppliers, only 652 unique chemicals, but 72% characterized and 58% safer chemistry. And so we can set a clear roadmap for how to close those data gaps there together, looking at frequency and function and things like that. But we can also help people find safer alternatives by saying, oh, common ingredients here are solvents. Well, in our system, we've got 359 solvents. Half of them are safer alternatives. Can we help you find something as a substitute? We've got 122 preservatives, antimicrobials. Many of those are safer alternatives. Can we help you find an alternative that will work in your formulation? So I want to bring this back to that setting metrics. What we want to do is encourage you to set a metric 0 at whatever level is appropriate for you. The purpose is to increase knowledge about chemicals being used either by sector or function, quantify the number of chemicals that have sufficient data to be characterized, and present that and measure that percent of characterization. And as you saw, the subpoints in all of these are percent of characterization, priorities for elimination, quantifying the safer chemistry, and prioritizing the functional data gaps for additional investment. And for each of the metric 0s that we're doing, we're focused on 4 consumer-facing supply chains over the next 5 years. We want to establish an action plan and provide year-over-year updates on progress. And so that's what you'll see next week with the Beauty and Personal Care report that's coming out. That will be the first of several reports published in conjunction with the Safer Chemistry Impact Fund. So next steps, establish your metric 0, participate in the HPD Builder ChemForward pilot. You can activate the pilot within the HPD Builder and start to get the ABCs for your HPDs. Boy, that's a lot of letters. We can work together to establish an industry metric 0. We can do something like we did with coatings. If we have a coalition of the willing, of a subgroup of the collaborative members here, we could participate in a working group, set the metric 0, and set that action plan that we just talked about. And then I think we can also help you find hopefully functional alternatives to optimize your products. We know in this whole history of our work together, where we've gone from, disclosure to screening, to assessment, to optimization, we're putting together the pieces now to really help you get to that next level of optimization. So I hope you'll reach out to Wendy and join the pilot. It's all ready for you to engage in. Thanks, Wendy.